Here's a cool game that people don't talk about much anymore. Silent Scope. This was such a cool game in the arcades because, hell, you were a sniper. Taking out bad guys, saving presidents' families, watching as American footballers try in vain to tackle evildoers. It rocked. It was a serious Sniper Wolf type deal, well worth anybody's quid. It's even got a port to the PlayStation 2, where it's perfectly decent. I mean, the frame rate's cut in half and you can only play it using a joypad, but it's still Silent Scope. It's not a bad port if you can pick it up on the cheap. But I kinda want to do something different here. What if, instead of playing and reviewing Silent Scope, I experimented on it using a 1000-degree hot knife? Let's see what happens. Wait a minute, stop. What the fuck am I doing? I mean, why would I do this? Why would I destroy a perfectly acceptable game? I mean, this bloody thing isn't even hot anyway. Anyway, as it happens, I know the result of this experiment already. If you cut Silent Scope in half with a 1000-degree hot knife, what you eventually end up with is the Sniper 2. Right, I'm gonna say this off the bat. The Sniper 2 is a hilariously awful game. In fact, it's a good contender for being the worst game ever released on the PS2. However, this does not mean you shouldn't go out and play it for yourself. The game is so out there, it's something you have to experience. It's basically the video game equivalent to a good MST3K movie, like a Coleman Francis or whatever. Still, if you don't want to do that, then I can at least give you a taste here. As far as background goes, the Sniper 2 is the sequel to, naturally, the Sniper 1. You may not have heard of the original game because it never left Japan. It was a part of the Simple 1500 series of budget PS1 titles, so called because the games were sold for 1500 yen, or roughly a little over £10. This sequel in all likelihood belonged to the PS2's Simple 2000 series, named for similar reasons. Anyway, the Sniper 2 was released on the PS2 in Japan in 2002, and then 2 years later it somehow ended up translated and released over here in Europe by Midas Games. Yeah, those guys again. I just love them, and they've outdone themselves here. The game itself is a weird mix. About 65% of it is cutscenes, another 20% is credits, yes, credits, and I would say about 15% of it is gameplay, and that's a really generous estimate. With so many cutscenes, obviously you're going to need a plot summary. You play as Harry, a top-class sniper who, back in the first game, was a fireman until his girlfriend, Melissa, was given the old fridge treatment. At which point Harry learnt the ropes, got his revenge, and stumbled upon another girl named CA, who just so happens to have the memories of her girlfriend. So far so Vertigo. The second game starts with these two on the run a bit, until they pick up a hitchhiker named Stanley.
I'm Harry Spencer, former firefighter.
I'm Claire Anderson, but people normally call me CA.
Where have I heard those names? Somewhere, I'm sure.
I'm hungry too. Let's get something to eat.
Okay, well, I know this great little place in Sacramento. Seeing as I owe you guys my life, it'll be my treat, I insist.
Suddenly, at a cafe, you're ambushed by goons. Fortunately, you've got your rifle still, and the owner of the cafe just so happens to be a CIA agent with a machine gun, so all turns out relatively fine. In fact, you weren't even the target of the raid. This guy was. Frickin' Kenny Omega. Okay, it's not Kenny Omega. He's Gabriel, he's another agent, and he takes CA while also infecting everyone with some substance called taclamakin that attacks your nervous system and kills you in 10 days.
He was a little scary. You know who he is?
No. but he smells the same as I do.
Harry?
Now it's your job to save the world from this substance, find out about this mysterious dude, and rescue your girl who's the same as the other girl you had who is now dead. And this hitchhiker guy is still with you because, well, of course he is. A complex plot then, one that's masterfully told with bad voice acting and Comic Sans subtitles. I already get the sense that Midas knew just what sort of game this was, but still wanted to release it anyway just for the bants. The Sniper 2's presentation is very weird indeed. It is a very low budget game. The cutscenes and graphics are basically on the same level as the PS1, which looks even funnier on the PS2 when the frame rate's bumped up. Nobody's mouths move in the cutscenes, which kind of gives the game a certain feel. Oh, I know what it reminds me of.
It's as if they're holding every person in the city hostage. So, Harry, it's your turn. Your target is the man carrying the Tackle McCann, Gary Baxter.
Understood.
However, you mustn't kill him. According to our source, there's a special device connected to the attaché case containing the weapon.
And the whole thing has a purposefully episodic feel. Every stage starts with the same credit sequence and ends with a staff roll, as if it were a TV show. There's even a little "next time on Sniper 2" stinner in the save options. This is why I said that 20% of the game consists of credits, if not more, although fortunately they can be skipped. This presentation could potentially work if not for a small issue. There is virtually no gameplay. In almost every stage, you usually have to use your rifle scope to find some guy in a crowd and then shoot them. One shot, one kill, that's it. Or you shoot a briefcase, or you shoot a skylight and then find the guy you have to shoot as they leave the building. Or you shoot the tyres out of a limousine and find your target that way, or something along those lines. All the actual gameplay portions of a stage are incredibly short, and there's only 12 stages in the game. Put them all together and you probably only have about 10 minutes of gameplay. You will shoot more people in the first wave of Silent Scope than you will ever shoot in the whole of Sniper 2. The lead-in and lead-out to this intense action is, well, cutscenes. Terribly animated, comically acted, incomprehensibly plotted cutscenes. Now that's not to say that what's here isn't occasionally challenging, although usually in a frustrating way. The controls are not exactly the best, and the sniping is shaky as hell, meaning that something like shooting tyres out of a moving vehicle can be somewhat annoying at times. Another annoying part of the game is how little info it gives you on the target. One lousy quality black and white photograph with multiple people in it, with the actual target not singled out. And besides that, there's about 3 character models in the whole game, so you've usually got to identify them through, like, a differently coloured suit or something along those lines. Again, this would be easier if the photographs just weren't black and freaking white. And all the while there's this terrible jazz music, the most painful MIDI-style jazz you can think of, like they were going for some Japanese Yakuza show, Takeshi Kitano type feel, but ended up closer to Joe Dolce than Joe Hisashi. It's not exactly fun to play, and there ain't a whole lot of it either. Which, as I said, means that most of your time in the game will be spent in the company of these utterly baffling cutscenes. The plot itself is... Look, I just shouldn't spoil it. Again, if you enjoy watching bad movies purely for the purpose of taking the piss out of them, then you will get a kick out of the Sniper 2 for similar reasons. It's as if you kidnapped Hideo Kojima, loaded him up with alcohol, crack cocaine and LSD, and then asked him to summarise the plot of all the Metal Gear Solid games in 5 minutes. Completely hat stand. And short too. All told, the game will last you little over an hour. There are alternate paths through the game that can be opened up, providing you get good ratings, which you automatically get if you always just wait until the last 10 seconds to complete a stage, regardless of whether you headshot a guy or hit them in their little toe, but chances are you probably won't play this more than once. Another question to ask is just how much Midas has to do with this weirdness, seeing as how they brought it to us and all. What exactly do Midas bring to the table in Localization? Well, for some insight, there's few people better to ask than longtime Midas guy Alistair Evans, who's done tons of games with the company and is now part of their Japanese RPG import subsidiary Ghostlight. He also produced the English version of the Sniper 2. Turns out there's a lot more work involved than just translating the text into English and calling it a day, and depending on just what form that text takes, whether it's modern or more traditional, that can either be relatively painless or a massive problem. This is but one part of the process, the first being evaluating every game that comes into the Midas offices from samples supplied by Japanese companies to see if they were potentially marketable to a Western audience, and even before that establishing relationships with said companies in the first place in order to obtain these samples. There's also the manuals too, which have to be translated not just into English, but into figs, French, Italian, German and Spanish. And of course box art, which was almost always totally different to the original. The Sniper 2 is a pretty good example. Alistair told me that the cool looking, unsaturated, contrasted to hell figure on the front of said box, that was Midas's IT guy at the time. On the whole, Midas kept straight and true to the original vision of a game as much as they could, with other major difficulties cropping up in terms of putting things in context. This could be tricky, particularly depending on the availability of the original developer. On the whole, there's probably a lot more people who worked on a localization job like Sniper 2 than you think there'd be. Perhaps a great deal more people than the amount that worked on the original Japanese version. The turnaround on this process would usually take anywhere from 6 to 12 months, from the moment that Midas made a call on a game to it being submitted to Sony for release. And was it successful? Well, in several cases, yes, including for the Sniper 2, which reportedly sold well over 100,000 copies in its time. Not bad at all for such a game. There are many who've experienced the weirdness. In the PS2 era, localization like this was pretty freaking common. The process that gave us the Sniper 2 also gave us awesome games like SOS The Final Escape and Global Defense Force lurking in the budget sections. Still, with that in mind, one wonders how something as strange as this game got through. One of the PS2 era's most glorious examples of Japanese kusoge. The monotone style voice acting and Comic Sans font are pretty understandable when this is what you're working with. Alistair told me that while Sniper 2 was far from being one of the proudest moments of his career, he still couldn't help but have a lot of love for it. And in the end, it's so out there that, regardless of how little gameplay there is and so on, I have a bit of love for it too. The Sniper 2 is an experience, and one that you should certainly, well, take on for yourself. I can't speak about value for money, seeing as it was actually a donation to me, thanks Chris, but a quick look on eBay shows that you can buy the game for all of £2, which is way less than the bottle of gin I would also recommend that you buy in order to really get the most out of the game. Don't worry about the tonic water either, because this game is all the tonic you're gonna need. Does that make sense? Well, no, but the Sniper 2 doesn't either. Bye for now. Thanks for watching this video. On the end screen you can see all the usual options such as watching another video, a link to my channel, and also a link to my Patreon account, which is where you can get on the list of the great and the good you see scrolling there. If you follow any of these options then thank you so much. And also, don't forget that you can ring the bell too. See ya!